We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.
And we're back with farmer, attorney, pastor, national correspondent, libertynation.com, a man, all things to all people, Mr. John Clark. Now, earlier in the show, we were talking with John about the technological issues and weather-related issues doing with electric vehicles. But now, John, I'd like to discuss more the federal promotion of electric vehicles. Now, this seems to be, and this is not just in the United States, this is worldwide in Western governments, where the push to get everybody away from gas vehicles, petrol-powered vehicles, to electric vehicles is running apace. But the infrastructure is not there, is it?
It's not, and that's also what's being revealed here. And as I studied for the piece, I realized that there is a very uneven pattern of existing charging stations around the country. In fact, Hertz Rentals suggests that you be very careful before you rent a car to make sure you plot your trip and make sure there will be sufficient charging facilities.
Sorry, John, if I may interrupt you very briefly, because you did mention Hertz rental cars in the first segment, and you just brought them up again now. The news there is that after going on a push to get a big range of electric vehicles within their fleet for rental presumably, they're actually selling those off because of the infrastructure problems, essentially, because as you point out, it was range anxiety, I believe you called it. And this is a problem that Hertz has acknowledged, that people really can't do that cross-country trip unless they're planning for extended stopovers with charging facilities.
I'm not sure that Hertz actually acknowledged the problem other than to say they're selling about 20,000 cars, I'm sure, at a loss.
Actions speak louder than words, John.
Yes. And so I may be filling in. I just want to be clear, what I attribute to Hertz versus my own insights. But if you think about it, this is how in the article I compared that the things that are impacting consumers in the rental market extend to private ownership as well. But particularly you see it heightened because usually often when we rent a car, it is for a long trip. It's because my car may never make it back again, or if I get a breakdown in Kentucky, that could be a real problem waiting for the shop to fix my transmission. So often people will use a car for long distance travel when they're renting. And those are trips that are particularly ill-suited for EV cars. So I think that's why, despite all the grand visions and the push, and a lot of people, when it comes to what they actually want to drive in and feel secure in and feel convenient in, and if you're on a long trip and you have to stop twice for an hour and a half just to fill up or to get energy again, that could actually mean you don't reach your destination in time. You have to stay over in a hotel. I don't know how good that is for the planet, but it's just not convenient. And these are serious problems that maybe they will solve, but when added to all of the others and the high cost, it's a harder and harder sell. Despite all of the free marketing and extremely high funding by our government with our tax dollars. I
love that you use the term free marketing by the federal government with taxpayer dollars. I think that's a wonderful. I'm going to have that put on a pillow, stitched onto a pillow for me. Free marketing by the federal government with federal dollars. I love it. But the point you raise is really fantastic. One is that you've got all these dollars going in to try and pick winners and losers in the market, right? And that's taxpayer dollars being used by the federal government to pick a winner and a loser. But there's also the subsidies as well that are being given out to purchasers of electric vehicles. But tell me, what are the details on that? And does it pass the sniff test, I guess I'm asking?
No, it doesn't. And I think it's a really important issue. And I'm glad you're raising it. And yes, they are our tax dollars. It's a lot of money. One study recently estimated that the true cost of an EV car was the equivalent of $17.33 a gallon of gas. This was out of Texas. But it's actually something I've been writing about for years, which is unique to the EV cars and the solar panels. In both cases, those who call themselves progressives are implementing extraordinarily regressive tax structures. And this is something very obvious to me. For your listeners, my background, I was a tax attorney for several years, including in the UK, in Birmingham. And one of the things I studied in tax policy in law school was the idea of regressive versus progressive taxation. And I assume, and you may assume, a lot of people assume everybody understands what this is, but regressive taxes are taxes that disproportionately impact the poor. And sales taxes are a good example. A poll tax is a good example. If I pay $50 a year as a poll tax and I only make $10,000 a year, that's a much higher percentage of my income than if I'm Mark Zuckerberg. What is the dirty secret of both EV cars and solar panels is that they have been funded rather surreptitiously on the backs of poor Americans who could never afford such a car.
Yeah.
And I really think that progressives, they just go quiet. In fact, I've pressed them on this, and they will argue that it's okay because who are we trying to help in the world? Poor people. Who is going to suffer the most from climate change that we're rescuing them from? Oh, it's the poor people. So they literally, as progressive, justify extraordinarily regressive tax structures. And what we're getting at here is that even with all of that money, EV cars are still failing. This is just a grotesque business failure, and it makes one recall that definition of fascism, which is when government and corporations collude. It is not driven by market factors, and this is what we see. It reminds me more of a banana republic or a Soviet or Chinese effort to have a 5-year plan for your new cars and your tuna fish and everything else that we will allocate for you.
Yeah.
It's a terrible failure, but it's also they should answer to the American people with all of these plans about who's paying for it. These elites, right out of Milton Friedman, socialism is A, telling B how much he's going to pay C. And if more Americans understood that they were paying for other people to drive these very expensive, very inefficient, ultimately planet-destroying vehicles for the short-term profits of a few stakeholders, I think there would be a little bit more of a pushback.
Yeah, it's not an aspect of the EV revolution that, just for example, the Biden administration really talks about. They talk about how it's saving the planet. They don't talk about how, sure, maybe it is. I think the jury's still out on this, although I can guess which way it's going. But it's not saving you, and it's not saving your children. It's impoverishing. It's literally impoverishing a generation of people, so that, as you point out, people who can afford electric cars get a minor tax break, a $7,000 tax break on buying an EV car that they can feel better about, whilst people are losing services from their communities because the tax dollars are being spent to essentially give a freebie to somebody who can afford it anyway.
But there's another big lie here that I think we should bring to the table, which is that EV car sales are going to help the economy. Solar panel technology installations are going to help the economy, and that we're going to reduce inflation by spending trillions of dollars on these things, by buying products from China. That's how we help our economy. Once upon a time in economics, you produced and sold goods to foreign entities to actually bring income into your country. That was called economic growth. But apparently now, if I'm in Vermont and I get paid to install a Chinese solar panel, I'm boosting the economy and fighting inflation. The opposite is true in both. It's a short-term blip for the economy, for a service economy, for installation. We might as well say that installing a hot tub in every home in America is going to resolve inflation and boost the economy. It will help hot tub sales for a little bit.
John Clark, thank you ever so much for joining us on this special edition of Liberty Nation Radio. Much appreciated.
Thanks for having me.
We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.
Don't get caught up in the media madness. Join our movement for free thinking and free speech at libertynation.com. Publishing news and analysis 24/7 with original articles by our team of authors who tell it like it is. Join us each week for online TV shows, The Uprising Podcast, and Liberty Nation Radio. We believe in free thinking and free speech. We are libertynation.com.